6 months.
Hello and welcome back to the Ask podcast. We are now on episode 3 of season 4, I want to say. I really should check these things in advance every time, and I fail every single time. Welcome back to an exciting new episode with a guest who I shall reveal to you very, very soon. But before that, let's meet our guest panellists today and find out a little bit about them.
Hi, I'm Matthew. This is my third time on the podcast, and I do all the essay subjects, so English, history, geography, and law as well.
Master of the humanities.
There we go.
Hopefully. No, sorry. And?
I'm Ollie. It's my first time being on the podcast. I'm in year 10, and I'm doing business, design, German, and
another
that I can't remember.
I've just insulted.
Yes.
It's harder when it's GCSEs. You've got more to remember.
Yeah, to be fair, you've got lots of options.
Yeah.
I genuinely can't remember.
But this is tense now. We want to know.
And drama club, of course. Most
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
We won't torture you over it. It'll come back to you later.
Yeah,
It's fine.
yeah.
But I enjoyed the... And I should have said, I am Mrs Summers. I'm the Deputy Head of English and Drama at John Hampden Grammar School.
And I'm Mr Till, and I'm the head of English and drama, although I really can't claim to be the head of drama, given the company that I'm in this recording studio with. But
Make a fair point.
hello to everybody listening. Great to have you. Going to be a good one today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, without further ado, we've got to introduce our guest from the English and Drama department, no less, Mr Durrant.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Well, a while ago. But yes. Nice to meet for the purposes of the podcast.
Yes, from
Absolutely.
an audio perspective.
Yes.
Fantastic. And you are here to talk to us about Stanislavski today.
I
am. I'm not sure if you're going to do a Mr. Language and start putting on
Start
accents.
putting on. I did threaten to do my
This has been
impression of
threatened.
Stanislavski, but it sounded a bit more like the character from. Gosh, I had his name earlier. Gru, didn't it? My
Yeah, from
Stanislavski
Minions and so
accent
on.
sounded like Gru when I was doing it in the office earlier. So
Well,
perhaps
we'll
I
see.
won't.
We'll see if you'll sneak it in there in a little bit. We always start off with the same question, which is why this topic in particular?
So Stanislavski is kind of the father of modern naturalistic acting. I trained as an actor 20 years ago. Ouch. And the drama school I went to, Lambda in West London, was a very kind of multi-approach drama school. There are drama schools that take one line. The Drama Centre springs to mind. They very much do take a Stanislavskian approach throughout their training. And it always sounds quite brutal whenever I've met anybody who went there. But Lambda, they kind of give you a box of tools and let you as an actor choose which ones work for you. And a lot of the Stanislavski stuff appealed to me. It is hard work. It's certainly not an easy route for an actor to go down in approaching their character, but I found that it gave me the best route into finding truth on stage.
Should we just start with what the approach is? What
Yes,
is the Stanislavski method?
So I prefer system. And the reason to method,
Because people misunderstand.
They
Yes.
do. They
People
do,
like me, for
absolutely.
example.
Yes. The reason I prefer system is because I think method acting has taken on meanings that Stanislavski never intended. Largely because of people like Meissner and Strasberg, who are American practitioners. They were theatre practitioners, but now largely we think of method acting as being something that particularly pretentious film actors do. Actors who abuse the lady who works in the canteen at lunchtime because their character is in a bad mood, and they live the part to that extent. People who don't speak to their wife and kids for 6 months because the character that they're playing in a film is in prison, or it's a ridiculous approach, totally unsustainable, and actually, in my opinion, doesn't produce good performances. There's a famous Laurence Olivier quote. Al Pacino was in a play with Laurence Olivier, strangely, and he was standing in the wings, and he was building himself up, and he was sort of shadow boxing and all sorts of strange physical jerks. And Laurence Olivier said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And Upchin said, "Well, my character's really worked up in this scene, and I need to be in the moment, and I need to." And Laurence Olivier said, "Well, why don't you try acting, darling?" And while I don't wholly subscribe to what Laurence Olivier would have been getting at, which was that really all you do is you switch it on, you go on stage, and you pretend. Laurence Olivier was very good at that. I was never as good as Laurence Olivier, I would admit that. And,
Very humble of you, sir.
Thank you. And so I had to work harder than he did, I guess, but not as hard as the proponents of what I would call method acting. So having said what it isn't, I will try to outline briefly what it is. That's not easy to do. I mean, Stanislavski wrote 4 books on his method and spent 40 years honing it and changing it, and he did adjust it a lot. For me, the important elements for me when I was an actor were units and objectives and physical actions. So the units and objectives approach involves breaking a play down into units, each one of which your character has a specific objective in that unit. And for me, this is about avoiding generalization. It's about avoiding saying as an actor, okay, in this scene I'm sad. And then you go on and you do sad and you say your words. And believe me, that is an approach that an awful lot of actors take, good and bad. Because some of them are very talented, what Stanislavski would have called mechanical actors. And he acknowledges in his books there are talented mechanical actors who are able to reproduce externally the shows of feeling a certain way. I could never do that. And so for me this approach worked better, which was to think, well, what does my character want in this scene? What is my objective? And when I say scene, I actually mean unit, because there nearly always will be more than one unit in a scene. What am I trying to do? What do I want to achieve? And layered onto that, you have given circumstances. And so, given that, to take an extreme example, I am missing a leg and I was up till 3 o'clock last night. My objective is that I want to win the 100-metre race on sports day.
Ambitious.
I play that objective with those given circumstances, and I bring life and truth to what's going on in the unit. So that's units and objectives. Physical actions are a way of an actor finding the given circumstances. And the way Stanislavski describes it is that in rehearsal, you improvise certain situations as a character. And in improvising those situations, you find physical actions that put you in the frame of mind that you want to be in a certain scene, that recreate the given circumstances that you need to be in order to play your objectives truthfully. And what he says is that once you've found those physical actions, then you can use those to recreate the given circumstances for yourself, because he recognises, Stanislavski, that actors have to repeat their performances. And he recognises that you're not going to be able to feel the depth of emotion that you need to feel for a number of different plays and a number of different characters 8 times a week when you're on stage performing a couple of matinees and some evening performances. And so he comes up with this kind of trick of physical actions that force through the body, force the mind into feeling a certain way and recreating those given circumstances. And that's where he's a big departure from people like Meissner, who requires of his actors that they go through the death of their mother every night in the theatre,
God.
which to me is just madness.
Yeah. Psychologically not very healthy. Okay, panellists, what are your initial questions that come to mind, having had that brilliant layout?
What I'd want to know is sort of what was his background? Where was he from?
So he was the son of 2 Russians born in Moscow who were very into amateur dramatics. His mother was the daughter of a French actress, but his parents were very into amateur dramatics. They founded a theatre company called the Alexeyev Circle, which was Stanislavski's original surname. He changed his name to Stanislavski as a stage name. And he didn't show any great talent for acting, but he was obsessed. and he worked incredibly hard on his voice, on his diction, on his physicality, on his approach to the texts. He was a real forensic student of play texts, and eventually became good at it, not through just being brilliant, but through working hard. And I think that's why his explanations of how it's best to approach a part are so useful for actors, because he's not one of these actors who can just do it. And I think possibly as teachers we're better at teaching things that we've had to work at rather than just find easy.
Where you have a process.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Really interesting, your idea of realism and the idea, his ideas of realism. Was that a very forward-thinking and modern idea, or was that something he had been?
It was a reaction against how theatre had been pretty much universally up to that point, which was a theatre of conventions, a theatre of what he would call bad mechanical acting, which is where there are certain signals that an actor sends to the audience. You know, I'm sad, I put my hand on my forehead.
Right.
I'm heartbroken, I hug myself. I'm angry, I start waving my arms around. And the audience understood what those signals meant, and that was how theatre worked. So an actor would become very good at making those gestures and those movements and those facial expressions look natural, but there were set things that you did if you were in certain mindsets, and the audience expected to see those. Whereas what Stanislavski wanted to see was a real person, truth.
It might be a bit of a simplification, but I suppose in the modern time you'd say show not tell, perhaps, because you're trying not to tell the audience the emotions you're feeling, but try to show them through.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And actions work in favour of show not tell, because when you're sad, you're often trying not to be. When you're drunk, you're often trying not to show anyone you are. So if as an actor you're going on stage and demonstrating to the audience that you're drunk, then there's no truth in that, because 9 times out of 10 a drunk person is not trying to demonstrate that they're drunk, they're trying to do the opposite. So yes, show don't tell is a very, very valid way of describing it.
And I suppose that keys into the motives as well, because if you're a real character and if you're a real person on stage, you would have these motives of, for example, not wanting to show you're drunk, rather than just for it to be a spectacle for the audience that you are drunk.
That's it, exactly, yes. Your intention as an actor is to do certain things. Most helpfully, I find, to do certain things to the other people that you're on stage with, rather than to show stuff to the audience.
Yeah.
One follows the other.
Are there any specific examples of how it's affected certain modern actors that would be like relatable to a modern audience?
It's difficult to know exactly how modern actors work unless you happen to have been in a rehearsal room with them. I mean, I do know that I've been in rehearsal rooms where the very first thing you do after the first read-through is to sit down with a pencil and a ruler and break the play into units and objectives. That is a really common thing that happens in rehearsal rooms all over Western Europe, certainly, as the first stage in rehearsals. One of Stanislavski's biggest impacts, by the way, was Chekhov and Chekhov's plays. Chekhov wrote The Seagull, and in 1896, in his first performance, it was a total failure. And Stanislavski persuaded him to allow him to direct it for a second performance in 1898, and it was a huge success. Chekhov at that point had sworn never to write another play. So that would have been a loss to humanity, wouldn't it, if only The Seagull had been written.
Is that because the original production missed the subtlety of Chekhov's writing? Because Chekhov famously, if Stanislavski changed acting, Chekhov had changed literature.
Yeah.
Something far more subtle and realistic and natural, like Ibsen as well, part of a movement, but Chekhov a really key figure.
Yeah.
Was Stanislavski's production able to actually capture the nuance in the writing?
Yes. So it came on the back of a production of a Tolstoy play whose name escapes me. That was the first play that Stanislavski put on with the Moscow Arts Theatre, which was this company that he set up. And Stanislavski wasn't happy with that at all, and the main reason he was unhappy with it was that he had actors who were schooled in the old way of doing things, and he was finding it very difficult for them to get them to do it. So he took on this Chekhov play, which was perfectly designed for the way that Stanislavski wanted to do things. That Chekhov and Stanislavski were made for each other. It's a huge, happy coincidence that they were in Moscow at the same time and doing theatre at the same time. They both needed each other. And Chekhov's plays were incredibly subtle. They were definitely written for naturalistic performance rather than mechanical declamatory performance. And I think it's very likely that 1896 failed production didn't work because it was a play written for naturalism being performed in a mechanical style.
That's really interesting because I went to see The Seagull recently,
Right.
and it went the opposite of naturalistic. It was completely ridiculous. It was just a chipboard background, plastic chairs, and it was very weird and exaggerated, and I really didn't enjoy it. And Sir tells me that I need to go and see proper versions of Chekhov because I have not been converted yet, but it sounds like I need to find a naturalistic interpretation.
You do. I mean, people take the mick out of Chekhov and say it's all about staring out of windows and trains being late and
I think of
cups of
awful
tea getting
student
spilled.
productions at the Edinburgh Fringe as well. Another kind of student cherry orchard.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, Chekhov is writing about trains being late because he writes about life, and he writes about points of crisis in ordinary lives, rather than lives that are one long point of crisis. And I think that's more real, isn't it? That's how life does work.
Just looking at some of his plays, you referencing the sort of the realistic setting and realistic people, the problems that they face. Moving on from that, could you explain the significance of the fourth wall for some of his plays? Yes.
So the proscenium arch existed before Stanislavski had done for ages. So the proscenium arch is this way of arranging a theatre where you have a stage with 3 physical walls, and then you've taken a wall out, and that's where the audience look through. You've got this box that's missing a side. So that's where the phrase "the fourth wall" comes from. Is that missing wall? Stanislavski wanted the fourth wall to be, and I'm not sure this is a phrase he would have used, but he wanted it to be more like a keyhole that the audience were looking through, without the people on the stage being aware that they were being watched. Whereas prior to that, the general approach was that the fourth wall was something that you broke, that you communicated across. And we obviously still talk about breaking the fourth wall today, and there are Shakespearean monologues that could be delivered in a way that breaks the fourth wall, or in a way that doesn't.
Yeah.
Stanislavski would never have allowed his actors to break the fourth wall.
I was going to say, because right now, studying Othello, there's so many asides by Iago to the audience, and also just the style of the Globe as a theatre, because you really only have that one back wall, and you rarely have setting, so it's more, or rather, you really have physical setting and props and ideas like that.
Yeah.
So that really is just the very opposite of that, I think.
Yeah, true. And I think it would have been pretty difficult to put a Chekhov play on in the Globe. It would have been ignored. We know what the Globe was like. You've got a bit to battle against, and I don't think this would have been too much for the Globe. I think
Things would have been thrown. Is what
things would definitely have been thrown. Yes.
Oh dear. Won't try that then. Next artistic director, don't put that to them as an idea.
Can you think of any external influences in his life that may have led to his ideas in, like, acting and drama?
Not that I know of. I do know that there was a man who I'm not mentioning, whose name I don't know, who was very important in setting up the Moscow Arts Theatre in the first place. A fellow director. I can't remember his name, but and of course his parents were a big influence on him. His mum being the daughter of an actress, and both of them being very interested in amateur theatre. That was what got him going, really.
Was that Vladimir Danchenko?
That's it. Yes. Well done. Thank you.
Good research.
Was that under the period of time where I can't never pronounce his name? Stanislavski.
Stanislavski. Yeah.
Sorry,
Stan. If you're a pretentious young actor, it sounds like you know what you're talking about.
Stanislavski, where he was trying to sort of appease to Stalin to try and keep
I
the
was gonna
theatre
ask a
alive.
question about
Yes,
that.
I do not know about. I'm afraid.
I think it was very much his plays became more focusing on socialist
Right.
socialist realism,
Yeah.
and but I think his ideas of realism and naturalism was still there. It was more just for a few years until sort of the fall of Stalinism, the fall of the
Right.
USSR.
There had to be a bit of pragmatism in what
Yes.
he was doing, presumably. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
until 1970s, where it was more towards finally it went back to the essence of Stanislavski's method.
Right.
Mm.
I think that was
Right.
effectively it.
Yeah, I read about because that was one of my questions I'd written down is how did he seem to avoid the censure of the kind of rise of Stalinism? But as it sounds like you're saying
By
that,
playing the game.
yeah, playing along with the game, which is but clearly he still had an enormous
Yeah.
impact. That he's someone that we talk about frequently today
Absolutely.
in his legacy.
Yes.
Can I put to you a series of actors and whether you think A,
Oh gosh.
they are living up to Stanislavski, and B, whether you like them or not?
You can.
They're obvious ones.
Okay, go on then.
Right, Daniel Day-Lewis.
The obvious one to pick when you're talking about the extremes of method acting.
Yes.
I don't think in Daniel Day-Lewis's case the ends justify the means. I've seen some brilliant performances from him, but I think even actors have to be decent human beings. And from what I've heard, I've never met him, he couldn't ever be described as a decent human being.
My impression too. Similarly, Christian Bale.
Well, he's neither good nor nice.
Oh, controversial.
Funny voices. Just because you say you're committed to the art and you give it your all and you're a method actor doesn't mean you are. He might even think he is.
He definitely thinks he is.
Stanislavski would, I'm absolutely convinced, sit watching his films saying probably his most famous line that he delivered to his actors over and over again, "I don't believe you, do it again." and that was one of his favourite rehearsal techniques, was just literally that's all he'd say.
Oh.
"Don't believe you, do it again."
Not very popular man.
Stanislavski.
Yes.
Well, I think the people that worked for him realised that they were onto a good thing.
I'm sure.
I think they realised it was worth it. As I said, it's not an easy approach to making theatre, but it works.
Yeah.
One final one, and I never know how to pronounce his name. Is it Joaquin or Joaquin Phoenix?
I'd say Joaquin.
Yeah. I think
Joaquin.
I
Okay,
would
we'll go
too.
Joaquin Phoenix.
I have seen good performances from Joaquin Phoenix. I think when Joaquin Phoenix isn't being Nicolas Cage, he's very good. And by the way, when Nicolas Cage is being anybody, he's terrible.
But fun because he's self-consciously so terrible.
I saw
Anyway.
that Wogan interview. When he flips onto the stage and does.
Oh no!
You have to
Okay,
look
I'm
it up.
gonna
It's
I'm gonna
hilarious.
YouTube that later.
But Joaquin Phoenix is capable of good stuff. He indulges quite a lot and thinks he's being brilliant, and actually he's just showing off.
Wow, like some of the finest actors of our generation destroyed by Sir.
3 of the most notoriously
No, difficult.
method
but
actors
also
in
win a lot of awards
Yeah,
at
true.
the same time. But yeah.
I've got a quick thing, and maybe our guests, our panellists, can come in on this as well. It's a really exciting year for drama at John Hampden. Not only are we doing drama with Mr Durrant into Year 8 for the first time, it's going to be a GCSE option for the first time,
Yeah.
but equally we've got the prospect of it becoming a future A-level option here. We've got, of course, the show, music department leading on Grease.
Yeah.
If people are interested in drama, staging things, acting, Stanislavski, we've got one person to look up.
Right.
What other big things, someone who thinks they might be interested in this, what else should they be looking up?
Well, I think they want to look at Meisner. Although I've kind of denigrated him today, he's an important person to think about, to consider. Brecht.
Oh yeah, we haven't mentioned him at all.
Almost the other extreme to Stanislavski,
Yeah.
and deliberately so.
Mm-hmm.
And then practitioners who I found particularly useful, Laban, who is a choreographer, a dance coach, was. I found that particularly useful because I was always being accused of being a very cerebral actor and not feeling it sufficiently in my body. And the Laban approach is a very physical one. It's almost an extension of Stanislavski's physical actions. That worked a lot for me. But I'd say Brecht and Meisner, and a bit of Laban if you really fancy going a bit left field.
So our new cast for Grease, or members of Drama Club, or all of those who might want to get more involved, a few things to look up there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Difficult to do Grease in a Stanislavski.
Might not work.
don't know if there are many musicals you can do
No.
in that sort of way.
Yeah.
No.
This is how I act every day. No, maybe not.
No.
On Sarah's note, did you guys want to ask anything further along the lines of any, because you're obviously drama enthusiasts. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask Sarah or know more about?
Not that I can entirely think of personally. No.
I think I was really interested in the realism. I think you explained it quite well. I think I get it now. The whole idea of it being real characters and real people, and it was again sort of show not tell. It was more a realistic play than just a bit of entertainment, like in the Globe, where it was more just evening entertainment for people, whereas it's a bit more sophisticated with. Not that I'm saying Shakespeare is unsophisticated.
I was going to say,
I
you
mean-
be careful where you're going there.
And Stanislavski directed some Shakespeare plays.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wonder how that worked.
I think did he
like to have
direct
seen it.
Hamlet? I think that was it because
quite a few of them, and appeared in a few of them. He was only a director and teacher for the last 10 years of his life because he had a heart attack, but he was an actor for quite a lot of the time as well as a director. Yeah.
Nice.
Rather than quickfire, I wondered whether we could find out a little bit more about Mr Durrant's previous acting career.
Oh my gosh.
Just
You probed
anything that the part that you were most proud of, or the acting work that you were most proud of, and just if people are listening, the difference between acting for a camera and acting for a live audience. What are some of the almost trying to get at what's it like to be an actor? Because a lot of people see the finished product on the screen, but they don't really know what goes into it.
the
I guess.
process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I should preface this by saying that I was an actor for about 5 years, and probably about just over 4 of them I was out of work. So
The typical story.
the typical story. But I did my fair share, I suppose. I did a number of radio plays. I had a good line in Young Posh Oxford Undergraduate, which features in quite a few Radio 4 afternoon plays, which wasn't a huge stretch. But then I can sing too, so I was in a number of musicals, and I think probably the one I was most proud of was a musical, which was called Failed States. I was in the original rehearsed reading of it, so the writers advertised for performers, so they wanted to come and perform it for the first time. Did it as a rehearsed reading, just with scripts in a sort of conference room, and then moved on to putting it on in the basement of a pub. And then it ended up at Latitude Festival, and then there's the Palace Theatre next to Buckingham Palace.
Wow.
And it was about the anti-terrorism response to 9/11 and that kind of thing. And it was
As a musical?
As a musical.
Really?
I played
quite deep for a musical.
Yeah.
I played a character called Joseph King. There was a kind of Kafka thing going on. And I was arrested after a business trip to the Middle East, and interrogated and tortured and all of that kind of thing. So the musical was this character's arc from coming home, giving his wife a kiss, to going mad in a jail cell.
Oh my
In a
God.
musical.
In a musical.
I want to see
Wow.
it.
Not so much
Yeah.
singing in the rain and singing while being waterboarded.
Yeah. It was great. And I think one of the reasons I feel so proud of it is because I was with it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And that character was mine. I played him in 6 different productions of that,
Wow.
with different actors every time, which is great.
I suppose you set the precedent then because you were the first, so I guess everyone else is just basing themselves off the legendary.
Absolutely. Well, that's it.
The
Well, you know,
legendary original.
when you get a script and in the inside the first 1 or 2 pages, there's usually the original cast.
Oh,
Spectacles has
Yeah,
got that.
has that, yeah.
If this play was ever published, which it won't be, I would be that original cast,
That's
which
it.
is a nice thing.
I think we should
Nice
do
thing.
it. Should be the school play next year.
Yeah. We
should
Mr.
have a
Rogers,
yeah,
if
they'll-
you're listening,
very
come
jolly.
on.
They'll have to
Failed
publish
states.
it if
I'd happily direct
if we do
it.
it.
I'm sure I
Oh,
could
wow.
get the rights. I'm still in touch
Bombshell.
with the writer.
I definitely want to see it. I don't know about anybody else. I think this has been great.
Been a
Really
fantastic
enjoyed it.
one. Yeah.
And you need to sneak a clue in, which obviously you spent ages coming up with, hours, days,
Oh yeah, so
researching
last
it.
week's clue, you'll have to go and see Mr. Khan's appearance talking about Malcolm X
Which will
for
definitely
the
release
first
very soon.
in a new series of clues. But the second clue in that same series, and you have to email me and say what connects them for a great prize. The second clue in that series is deadly blank.
Ooh, I'm writing that down.
Deadly blank. Listen last week for the first clue. What connects them? Send me an email and you will win a fantastic prize.
Definitely need to have a good think.
I've got the theme tune from Blankety Blank in my head now.
That was entirely what I was intending.
Yeah, good.
If that's the answer, then brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much for listening to us today. I've really enjoyed it, and fantastic panelists and really perceptive questions from a whole range of different areas, having their own responses too and their own thoughts. So that was fantastic. And I'm just, sir, you're just very easy to listen to. I feel like we could have gone on for another hour quite easily, but unfortunately some people have lessons to go to period 5. Which is
Some people.
Yes,
Some
they
people.
do.
some people. Oh, this person here,
this one.
this person. There we go. So, unfortunately, we have to cut it short. But thank you so much to Mr. Durrant. Fantastic today. And, as Sir says, hopefully we're going to get lots of people interested in GCSE drama and A-level drama and so on. And really picking up on some of these ideas and trying out some Stanislavski. We've got the whole Stanislavski system, not
Absolutely.
method, system. See, I've learned that.
And because we'll have some young listeners, just a quick note on how at the moment Russia is in the news for all the wrong reasons. But if all you've heard about Russia is the last few years and under the regime of Putin, looking back at what a rich, fantastic culture Russia has in the arts, novelists, 19th century in particular, end of the 19th century, figures like Chekhov and Stanislavski, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, wonderful writers, actors, composers. Please don't think that Russia is defined by its current political leaders.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point to end on, sir. So just falls to me to thank all the usual lovely people. Obviously, Thomas, who honestly, as far as I'm concerned, should be paid royally for the amount he does for this school. Thomas H. in Year 12, holding the school together single-handedly, as far as I can tell. He's fabulous. And his lovely team that help him out as well. Thank you to them. Thank you to Mr. Till for being my ever wonderful co-host and hopefully not spilling that hot drink all over any of the electronic equipment just before the end of this podcast. That would be great, sir.
Always a pleasure.
Brilliant panelists. Brilliant, sir. And follow us, of course, on Twitter at JHDS English. Spread the word far and wide. Follow us on our YouTube channel. It's under my name, Jenny Summers. And etc. Have a wonderful week. Next podcast may be my last podcast for some time. Maybe we'll leave that for next time. So this guarantees we have to do another one now.
Yeah.
Just otherwise, it's just too much of a cliffhanger.
We'll see you then.
So take care. See you soon, or hear from you soon.